Why narcissists avoid kissing empaths? It sounds small, almost harmless, right? But what if I told you this one detail exposes everything they're trying to hide? A kiss isn't just lips meeting. It's presence, vulnerability, and emotional truth. And that's exactly where narcissists begin to panic. Empaths don't kiss to impress, perform, or control. They kiss to connect. And connection is dangerous to someone who survives behind a mask. You may have noticed it, the hesitation, the avoidance, the quick peck instead of real intimacy. That moment isn't random. It's a silent confession. In this video, we're going to uncover the psychological reason narcissists pull away from empaths, why affection feels threatening to them, and how Carl Jung's idea of the shadow explains this behavior in a way most people never talk about. Stay until the end, because once you understand this, you'll never question your worth again, or chase emotional closeness from someone who's incapable of giving it. And if this already feels uncomfortably familiar, tap subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And drop a comment with a simple, "I see it now." If this has ever happened to you, a kiss may seem like a simple act of affection, but psychologically it carries far more weight than most people realize. It is one of the few moments where two individuals must be fully present with each other, emotionally and physically at the same time. For empaths, a kiss is not a performance or a habit, it is a form of communication. It is how they express safety, care, and emotional availability without words. When an empath kisses someone, they are offering presence. They are opening a space where emotions can be felt rather than managed or controlled. This kind of intimacy requires authenticity, and authenticity is something empaths naturally bring into their connections. They do not switch it on or off. It simply exists in how they relate to others. That is why a kiss for an empath becomes an energetic exchange rather than a physical gesture. It carries feeling, awareness, and intention all at once. Narcissists experience this very differently. While they may enjoy attention, admiration, or validation, deep emotional presence makes them uncomfortable. A real kiss removes the distance they depend on to maintain control. It does not allow them to perform, impress, or dominate the moment. Instead, it asks them to be emotionally available, even if only briefly. Narcissists often build their sense of self around control of how they are seen, how close others get, and how much vulnerability is allowed. When they encounter an empath, they sense immediately that the rules are different. Empaths do not chase power in relationships, they seek connection. That difference creates tension. A kiss becomes a moment where control slips, and that loss of control can feel threatening to someone who relies on emotional defenses to feel safe. What makes this dynamic even stronger is that empaths tend to be emotionally attuned. They feel subtle shifts in energy, hesitation, and emotional distance. During a kiss, that awareness increases. Narcissists often sense this, even if they cannot consciously explain it. They realize that an empath can feel what is real and what is not. A kiss, in this sense, becomes a mirror. It reflects back emotional truth, and narcissists are often running from their own inner reality. Many narcissistic traits develop as protection against early emotional wounds, shame, or neglect. Over time, these defenses harden into patterns of avoidance, superiority, or emotional withdrawal. When an empath offers genuine closeness, it brushes against those old wounds. The narcissist may feel exposed, even if the empath has no intention of confronting them. This is why narcissists may avoid kissing, rush through it, or keep it emotionally shallow. It is not always a lack of attraction. In many cases, it is the opposite. The empath's emotional depth feels intense, and intensity can feel dangerous to someone who survives by staying emotionally disconnected. A kiss demands stillness, presence, and mutual vulnerability. There is no audience, no admiration, no external validation, only two people sharing a moment. For narcissists, this can activate discomfort, anxiety, or an urge to regain control. They may pull away physically, joke to break the moment, or shift the focus back to themselves. These reactions are not random. They are defense mechanisms. From an energetic perspective, a kiss blends emotional states. Empaths tend to regulate emotions through connection, while narcissists regulate emotions through control or distance. When those two systems meet, the empath remains open, but the narcissist feels overwhelmed. The empath's openness can feel invasive even though it is offered gently. This is where avoidance begins. The narcissist learns, often unconsciously, that kissing an empath brings them too close to feelings they are not ready to face. Instead of processing those emotions, they choose distance. Understanding this dynamic is important, especially for empaths who may internalize the rejection. When a narcissist avoids intimacy, it can make the empath question their desirability or worth. But the avoidance is not a reflection of the empath's value. It is a reflection of the narcissist's relationship with vulnerability. The unspoken power of a kiss lies in what it reveals. For empaths, it reveals connection. For narcissists, it reveals what they have been avoiding within themselves. That is why such a small moment can carry such deep psychological meaning, and why the absence of it can speak louder than words. Empathic intimacy feels dangerous to narcissists because it operates on a completely different emotional language than the one they are used to speaking. Empaths connect through authenticity. They do not calculate closeness or manage affection to gain advantage. When they feel openly. When they care, it shows naturally in their voice, their body language, and their touch. Intimacy, for an empath, is not something to be earned or controlled. It is something that grows when two people are emotionally present with each other. This kind of connection is quiet, honest, and deeply human. It does not require constant validation or attention. It requires sincerity, and sincerity is precisely what destabilizes a narcissist. Narcissists, on the other hand, connect through performance. Over time, they learn how to present themselves in ways that attract admiration, approval, or desire. Their charm, confidence, or intensity is often carefully constructed, even if it appears effortless. This performance protects them from being seen too closely. It allows them to receive attention without offering emotional vulnerability in return. In social settings, this strategy works well. They can impress, dominate conversations, or appear desirable without ever revealing their inner world. But intimacy removes the stage. When the audience disappears, the performance loses its purpose. A kiss, especially with an empath, does not reward acting. It demands emotional presence. During empathic intimacy, there is no script to follow. An empath responds to what is real in the moment, not what looks impressive. This creates pressure for the narcissist because their usual tools stop working. They cannot charm their way through vulnerability. They cannot distract with confidence or control. Instead, they are faced with stillness, closeness, and the expectation of emotional reciprocity. In that space, what narcissists work hardest to hide begins to surface. Emotional emptiness, insecurity, and the absence of genuine attachment become harder to ignore. Even if these feelings remain unspoken, they are felt. And being felt is often more frightening than being confronted. A kiss can make this exposure immediate. It brings two people into close physical and emotional proximity, where subtle emotional cues become impossible to hide. Empaths tend to notice hesitation, emotional distance, or lack of presence. They do not judge it, but they feel it. Narcissists sense this awareness, and it can trigger deep discomfort. The fear is not always conscious. It often appears as restlessness, avoidance, or sudden emotional withdrawal. The narcissist may feel an urge to pull back, change the subject, or regain control of the interaction. These reactions are protective. They are attempts to escape a moment that feels too revealing. What makes empathic intimacy particularly threatening is that it invites mutuality. Empaths do not want to be admired from a distance. They want to be met. They expect emotional responsiveness, even in silence. For a narcissist, this expectation can feel overwhelming. Many narcissists struggle with genuine attachment because attachment requires consistency, empathy, and emotional availability. Without these skills, closeness becomes exhausting rather than nourishing. Instead of feeling comforted by intimacy, they feel exposed by it. The empath's openness highlights what is missing, not what is impressive. This dynamic often leads narcissists to confuse attraction with danger. They may feel drawn to empaths because of their warmth and emotional depth, yet simultaneously feel threatened by it. The closer the empath gets, the more the narcissist's inner defenses activate. Avoiding intimacy then becomes a way to preserve the false self they rely on. By keeping relationships shallow or controlled, they can maintain the image they have created without facing their inner emptiness. A kiss, however, breaks through that surface. It asks for something real, even if only for a moment. For empaths, this can be deeply confusing. They may sense emotional distance and try to close the gap with more care, more patience, or more understanding. But empathic intimacy cannot heal someone who is unwilling to be present with themselves. The danger narcissists feel is not caused by the empath. It comes from within. It is the fear of being seen without the mask, of being felt without control, and of realizing that performance cannot replace connection. Understanding this helps empaths step out of self-blame and recognize that avoidance of intimacy is not a reflection of their worth, but a reflection of the narcissist's unresolved relationship with authenticity. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow offers a powerful way to understand why narcissists often pull away from empaths, especially in moments of emotional closeness. The shadow, as Jung described it, is the part of the psyche that holds everything we have denied, repressed, or learned to hide in order to survive. It contains traits, emotions, and needs that once felt unsafe to express. These are not always dark or immoral qualities. Often they include vulnerability, dependence, fear, shame, and even the desire for genuine love. When these parts are ignored rather than understood, they do not disappear. They remain active beneath the surface, influencing behavior in unconscious ways. Narcissists typically develop a strong false self as a defense against early emotional pain. This false self is built to appear confident, superior, self-sufficient, or untouchable. It keeps the individual protected from feelings that once felt overwhelming, such as rejection or inadequacy. Over time, this protective identity becomes rigid. Anything that threatens it feels dangerous. Jung believed that the shadow is often projected onto others, meaning we react strongly to qualities in people that remind us of what we have disowned in ourselves. Empaths, by their nature, become powerful triggers in this process. Empaths mirror emotions honestly. They do not force reflection, but their presence naturally brings emotional truth to the surface. When an empath feels something, it shows. When they connect, it is real. This authenticity acts like a psychological mirror. For narcissists, this mirror reflects parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. Vulnerability, emotional need, sensitivity, and even longing are all qualities that often live in the narcissistic shadow. Seeing these traits reflected in an empath can activate discomfort, shame, or anger, not because the empath has done anything wrong, but because the reflection threatens the carefully constructed identity of control and superiority. Instead of integrating the shadow, narcissists often respond by withdrawing. Confronting the shadow requires self-awareness and emotional courage. It means admitting that the false self is incomplete and that the rejected parts still exist. For someone who relies on denial to feel stable, this confrontation feels like a loss of psychological safety. Avoidance becomes the easier option. By pulling away from the empath, the narcissist avoids the inner conflict that the mirror creates. The distance helps them return to familiar defenses where they feel in control again. Jung emphasized that the shadow grows stronger the more it is ignored. The more narcissists avoid emotional truth, the more intense their reactions can become when it appears. This explains why they may feel irritated, anxious, or emotionally overwhelmed in the presence of empaths, even during moments that seem harmless. A simple gesture of closeness can trigger an internal struggle they do not fully understand. The empath's openness highlights what has been buried, and that exposure feels threatening. This dynamic also explains why narcissists may accuse empaths of being too sensitive or too emotional. These accusations are often projections. The emotions they reject in the empath are the same emotions they reject in themselves. By labeling the empath as the problem, they protect their self-image and avoid looking inward. Jung believed that true psychological growth comes from integrating the shadow, not denying it. But integration requires willingness, and narcissists often lack the motivation to face what feels painful or destabilizing. For empaths, understanding the role of the shadow is essential. It helps them recognize that the withdrawal they experience is not a failure of connection, but a defense against self-awareness. Empaths do not create the narcissist's discomfort, they reveal it. Their presence simply brings emotional reality into the room. When narcissists retreat, it is because the reflection has become too intense, not because the empath has done something wrong. Carl Jung's insight reminds us that what we run from within often determines what we avoid in others. Narcissists are not running from empaths themselves, they are running from the parts of their own psyche that empaths illuminate. Until those shadow aspects are acknowledged and integrated, intimacy will always feel threatening. Withdrawal will always feel safer than self-confrontation. Understanding this allows empaths to step out of confusion and self-blame and to see the pattern for what it truly is, a psychological escape from the self. The tension between control and connection sits at the center of why narcissists pull away from empaths, especially during moments of physical intimacy. Narcissists are most comfortable in relationships where admiration flows toward them without requiring emotional closeness in return. Admiration allows distance. It keeps power intact. They can be idealized, praised, or desired without having to reveal their inner world. Connection, however, works differently. Connection requires mutual presence. It asks both people to be emotionally available even in silence. For a narcissist, this shift from being admired to being emotionally met can feel deeply unsettling. Kissing is one of the clearest examples of this difference. It is not an act of dominance or performance. It cannot be controlled in the same way as words, charm, or image. A kiss requires both people to slow down, tune in, and share the same emotional space. For an empath, this feels natural. Empaths are wired for reciprocity. They expect emotional responsiveness not as a demand, but as a shared rhythm. When they kiss someone, they are present, attentive, and emotionally open. They assume, often unconsciously, that intimacy is mutual. For narcissists, this expectation changes the rules. They are not comfortable when closeness levels the emotional playing field. Control depends on imbalance, one person seeking, the other being sought, one person giving admiration, the other receiving it. When empath expects reciprocity, the narcissist loses that advantage. Emotional equality feels like a loss of power. Even if the narcissist desires closeness on some level, their instinct is to retreat the moment control begins to slip. This is why narcissists may enjoy being chased, desired, or admired, yet hesitate when intimacy becomes real. Physical closeness without emotional distance makes them feel exposed. A kiss invites emotional presence without hierarchy. There is no superior position in genuine intimacy. Both people are equally involved. For narcissists who rely on dominance, superiority, or emotional distance to feel safe, this equality can trigger discomfort. Avoiding physical intimacy becomes a way to restore familiar power dynamics. Empaths often sense this shift. They may notice that affection decreases just as emotional closeness increases. When the empath leans in emotionally, the narcissist steps back physically. This push-pull pattern is not accidental. It is a protective response. The narcissist may not consciously think, "I am losing control," but their body and behavior react as if a boundary has been crossed. Pulling away restores emotional distance and reduces the demand for reciprocity. Another reason narcissists avoid kissing is that it removes the ability to manage perception. Words can be manipulated, but genuine presence cannot be faked for long. A kiss exposes emotional absence quickly. Empaths feel this absence, even if they do not name it. The narcissist senses being felt rather than admired, and that shift creates anxiety. Avoidance becomes a way to prevent that exposure. Over time, this dynamic can be painful for empaths. They may interpret the withdrawal as rejection or assume they are asking for too much. But emotional reciprocity is not an unreasonable expectation. It is a basic element of healthy connection. The problem is not the empath's need for closeness, it is the narcissist's discomfort with equality. Narcissists prefer relationships where they are needed, but not required to give in the same way. Intimacy disrupts that arrangement. Understanding the difference between control and connection helps clarify the pattern. Narcissists do not pull away because they lack attraction. They pull away because intimacy removes the structures that keep them emotionally safe. A kiss asks for presence, not performance. It invites connection rather than control. When faced with that choice, narcissists often choose distance because distance allows them to maintain the identity and power dynamics they depend on. For empaths, recognizing this truth can bring clarity and help them stop chasing closeness from someone who experiences genuine connection as a threat rather than a bond. Empaths often become emotional mirrors without intending to be, and this is one of the deepest reasons they trigger fear in narcissists. An emotional mirror does not confront, accuse, or demand. It simply reflects what is present. Empaths do this naturally through their awareness, sensitivity, and emotional honesty. They notice shifts in tone, hesitation in touch, and distance in presence. They respond to what is real rather than what is presented. This quality can feel grounding in healthy relationships, but for narcissists it can feel deeply unsettling. When someone reflects emotional truth, it becomes harder to hide from oneself. Narcissists often carry unresolved shame, vulnerability, and emotional wounds that have never been processed. These feelings are usually buried early in life, when emotional expression felt unsafe or unrewarded. To survive, they learn to suppress those parts and replace them with confidence, control, or emotional detachment. Over time, this defense becomes automatic. They may not even be aware of what they are protecting themselves from. But when an empath enters their emotional space, the defenses are quietly challenged. The empath's presence does not reinforce the false self. Instead, it reflects the emotional gaps beneath it. This is where fear begins. A simple act of affection, such as a kiss or gentle closeness, can activate layers of emotion the narcissist has avoided for years. The empath's openness invites emotional reciprocity, even if no words are spoken. That invitation alone can trigger old feelings of inadequacy or abandonment. The narcissist may suddenly feel exposed without understanding why. Shame can surface, not because the empath has judged them, but because the mirror reveals what they feel is missing inside. Vulnerability follows closely behind, and vulnerability feels dangerous to someone who equates it with loss of control. Empaths do not intensify emotions by force, they allow emotions to exist. This allowance can be overwhelming for narcissists who rely on suppression to function. When feelings are allowed, unresolved trauma has room to surface. Old emotional pain does not stay neatly buried. It emerges as discomfort, irritability, anxiety, or an urge to escape. In these moments, affection stops feeling soothing and begins to feel threatening. The narcissist may associate the empath with emotional overload, even though the real source of the distress is internal. This is why narcissists often pull away from empaths during moments that should feel warm or intimate. Their nervous system reads closeness as danger. The emotional mirror has activated something unresolved, and distance becomes the fastest way to regulate that internal chaos. Avoidance is not about the empath doing something wrong. It is about the narcissist protecting themselves from emotional exposure. The fear is not logical, but it is deeply ingrained. Projection often follows. Narcissists may accuse empaths of being too intense, too emotional, or too demanding. These labels serve a psychological purpose. By placing the discomfort onto the empath, the narcissist avoids taking responsibility for their own emotional reactions. The empath becomes the problem, not the unresolved trauma being reflected. This projection helps preserve the narcissist's self-image and keeps the mirror at a safe distance. For empath, this experience can be confusing and painful. They may feel rejected for simply being present and caring. They may question whether their sensitivity is a flaw. But emotional reflection is not a weakness. It is a form of awareness. The fear it triggers in narcissists is not caused by the empath's depth, but by the narcissist's unhealed inner world. When truth is reflected, what has been avoided demands attention. Understanding this dynamic allows empaths to release self-blame. It clarifies that the withdrawal, coldness, or avoidance they experience is a fear response, not a rejection of who they are. Emotional mirrors do not create wounds, they reveal them. For narcissists, that revelation can feel overwhelming until they are willing to face their own vulnerability and heal unresolved trauma. Even simple affection will continue to feel threatening. Recognizing this truth helps empaths protect their own emotional well-being and choose connections where reflection is welcomed rather than feared. Empaths often become emotional mirrors without intending to be, and this is one of the deepest reasons they trigger fear in narcissists. An emotional mirror does not confront, accuse, or demand. It simply reflects what is present. Empaths do this naturally through their awareness, sensitivity, and emotional honesty. They notice shifts in tone, hesitation in touch, and distance in presence. They respond to what is real rather than what is presented. This quality can feel grounding in healthy relationships, but for narcissists it can feel deeply unsettling. When someone reflects emotional truth, it becomes harder to hide from oneself. Narcissists often carry unresolved shame, vulnerability, and emotional wounds that have never been processed. These feelings are usually buried early in life when emotional expression felt unsafe or unrewarded. To survive, they learn to suppress those parts and replace them with confidence, control, or emotional detachment. Over time, this defense becomes automatic. They may not even be aware of what they are protecting themselves from. But when an empath enters their emotional space, the defenses are quietly challenged. The empath's presence does not reinforce the false self. Instead, it reflects the emotional gaps beneath it. This is where fear begins. A simple act of affection, such as a kiss or gentle closeness, can activate layers of emotion the narcissist has avoided for years. The empath's openness invites emotional reciprocity even if no words are spoken. That invitation alone can trigger old feelings of inadequacy or abandonment. The narcissist may suddenly feel exposed without understanding why. Shame can surface not because the empath has judged them, but because the mirror reveals what they feel is missing inside. Vulnerability follows closely behind, and vulnerability feels dangerous to someone who equates it with loss of control. Empaths do not intensify emotions by force, they allow emotions to exist. This allowance can be overwhelming for narcissists who rely on suppression to function. When feelings are allowed, unresolved trauma has room to surface. Old emotional pain does not stay neatly buried. It emerges as discomfort, irritability, anxiety, or an urge to escape. In these moments, affection stops feeling soothing and begins to feel threatening. The narcissist may associate the empath with emotional overload, even though the real source of the distress is internal. This is why narcissists often pull away from empaths during moments that should feel warm or intimate. Their nervous system reads closeness as danger. The emotional mirror has activated something unresolved, and distance becomes the fastest way to regulate that internal chaos. Avoidance is not about the empath doing something wrong. It is about the narcissist protecting themselves from emotional exposure. The fear is not logical, but it is deeply ingrained. Projection often follows. Narcissists may accuse empaths of being too intense, too emotional, or too demanding. These labels serve a psychological purpose. By placing the discomfort onto the empath, the narcissist avoids taking responsibility for their own emotional reactions. The empath becomes the problem, not the unresolved trauma being reflected. This projection helps preserve the narcissist's self-image and keeps the mirror at a safe distance. For empaths, this experience can be confusing and painful. They may feel rejected for simply being present and caring. They may question whether their sensitivity is a flaw. But emotional reflection is not a weakness. It is a form of awareness. The fear it triggers in narcissists is not caused by the empath's depth, but by the narcissist's unhealed inner world. When truth is reflected, what has been avoided demands attention. Understanding this dynamic allows empaths to release self-blame. It clarifies that the withdrawal, coldness, or avoidance they experience is a fear response, not a rejection of who they are. Emotional mirrors do not create wounds, they reveal them. For narcissists, that revelation can feel overwhelming. Until they are willing to face their own vulnerability and heal unresolved trauma, even simple affection will continue to feel threatening. Recognizing this truth helps empaths protect their own emotional well-being and choose connections where reflection is welcomed rather than feared. Avoidance is often misunderstood as indifference, but in the case of narcissists and empaths, it is far more complex. Avoiding kisses is rarely about a lack of attraction. In many situations, the attraction is present, sometimes even intense. What drives the avoidance is psychological self-protection. For narcissists, deep intimacy threatens the structure they have built to survive emotionally. Over time, they develop a false self designed to appear confident, in control, and emotionally untouchable. This identity helps them function, but it depends on distance. Anything that risks exposing what lies beneath that surface can feel dangerous. Kissing is not a neutral act for narcissists when it involves an empath. It brings emotional closeness that cannot be easily managed or manipulated. A kiss requires presence. It slows the moment down and removes the usual defenses of charm, distraction, or control. In that space, the false self becomes harder to maintain. The narcissist may feel as though they are being seen rather than admired. Being seen requires authenticity, and authenticity threatens the carefully maintained image they rely on. Avoidance becomes the safest option. This distancing often happens instinctively. Narcissists may not consciously decide to pull away. Their nervous system reacts first. Intimacy activates anxiety, tension, or discomfort, and the body responds by creating space. Avoidance functions as an emotional shield. By stepping back, the narcissist regains a sense of control and stability. The distance allows them to return to familiar patterns where they feel secure in their role. What looks like rejection is often a form of emotional regulation. Empaths tend to notice this shift immediately. They feel the emotional gap widen and may try to close it with understanding or reassurance. Unfortunately, this can intensify the narcissist's fear. The more the empath offers closeness, the more exposed the narcissist feels. Deep intimacy risks revealing emotional emptiness, insecurity, and unmet needs that have been hidden for years. The false self cannot survive under that kind of emotional light. Avoidance protects it. This defense mechanism is reinforced over time. Each moment of withdrawal temporarily reduces emotional discomfort, teaching the narcissist that distance equals safety. Kisses, affection, and closeness become associated with emotional threat rather than comfort. As a result, avoidance may increase rather than decrease. The narcissist learns to maintain connection only at a level they can control. Anything deeper feels unsafe. It is important to understand that this avoidance is not personal. Empaths often internalize the distance and assume they are unwanted or asking for too much. In reality, they are asking for authenticity. The narcissist's response is not about the empath's value, but about the narcissist's fear of exposure. Deep intimacy challenges the false self, and the false self exists to prevent emotional pain. Until that pain is faced, avoidance remains the preferred strategy. Avoidance also allows narcissists to preserve power. Distance keeps the relationship unbalanced. It prevents emotional reciprocity and maintains control over closeness. When an empath seeks mutual presence, the narcissist senses a shift toward equality. Equality removes the emotional advantage they depend on. Avoidance restores that imbalance and keeps the relationship within familiar boundaries. Understanding avoidance as a defense mechanism helps empaths regain clarity. It reframes withdrawal not as rejection, but as fear-based self-protection. This awareness can prevent empaths from chasing closeness that the narcissist cannot safely offer. Deep intimacy requires two people willing to be seen. When one person relies on a false self for emotional survival, intimacy will always feel risky. Ultimately, avoidance is not about love or desire. It is about safety. Narcissists distance themselves from empaths because empaths bring emotional truth into the relationship. That truth threatens the identity the narcissist has constructed to avoid pain. Until the false self is no longer needed, deep intimacy will continue to feel dangerous, and avoidance will remain the chosen defense.